Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Ronald Eugene Adkins, Carrie Alexander, David Alicia, David James Amheiser, David Lynn Andrews, Oscar Anzaldúa, Alan Frederick Ashall, Carl Bracy Ayers Jr., Sherelle Edward Bales, John Richard Ballard, Russell Reed Bannister, Melvin Carroll Bates Jr., William Darwin Blenkinsop, Daniel Jacques Botten, Vernon Edward Brackens, George Eugene Cahill, Marshall Eugene Callahan, Lyndall Ray Callahan, Robert Marion Carn Jr., Dave Scott Caruth Jr., William T. Chaffin III, Martin James Conrad, Melvin Copeland, Rutilio Porfirio Cordova, Michael Joseph Courtney, Fred Burkett Craddock Jr., Harold Carl Daly II, John Lawrence Davis, Frank John DeMarco, Keith Allen DeVries, Jackie Clyde DeHart, Alan Severn Dunbar, Robert Ray Duncan, Monty Dale Dykes, Richard Allen Evans Jr., Richard Dwayne Faircloth, Willie James Fawkes, James Willard Fenton, Larry Leonard Fincher, Robert John Joseph Foley, Larry Edward France, Garcley M. Fredwell, George Francis Gallagher, Ernesto R. Gallardo, Donald Leroy Gasser, Ralph Donald Godfroy, Rudolph Gorham, Richard Dean Goss, Albert Stephen Graff, Donald Bryce Green, Daniel Lawrence Grover, Daniel Guest, John Howard Guthridge, Gary Albert Hall, David Colin Hall, Alan Lynn Harris, Howard John Hartman, Harry Thomas Henthorne, Louis Vincent Herman Jr., Louis Anthony Herrera, Lonnie O'Neill Hill, Albert C. Horace Jr., Jack Selwyn Imlaw, Cecil Jackson Jr.,
Brian Edward J., Benton Arthur Jeter, Lyle Lamar Johnson Jr., Thomas Weldon Jones, J. D. William Kersey, Richard Didicus Kruppa, Timothy Francis Lease, Charles Joseph MacDonald, Peter Stephen Martinez, Robert Franklin Maurer, Reed McKinley May Jr., David Vernon McCollum, Charles Thomas McCorkle, Robert James McDonough, John Joseph McMonigal Jr., Henry Sterling McWhorter, Mark Wendell Minier, Lewis Charles Moore, Doyle Anthony Morris, James Thomas Moses, Richard Stephen Moxley, Louis Charles Musser II, Michael Leo Nath, William Gary Nelms Jr., Larry Stephen Newbern, J. Roy Norman, Edwin Joseph Almeida, Richard Arnold Osteen Jr., Nicholas R. Palumbo Jr., Hamilton Paul Jr., Robert Conroy Perry, Marshall W. Phillips Jr., Richard Lee Powell, Ronald Lee Powers, Michael Patrick Quinn, Robert Bruce Randall, Florentino Rangel, James Daniel Rayner, Raymond Patrick Riley, Gerald Raymond Roy, Edward Leon Sanders, Howard Eugene Satterfield, Richard Lee Scaduto, Thomas Randall Scalise, Lawrence Elwood Scheib Jr., Jack Irvin Schober, Stanton James Setka, John Frederick Schaefer, Donald Wayne Simonson, Roman Cisneros, Claiborne John Skinner, John Byron Smith, Walter Lee Smith, Gerald Allen Smith, Bruce Martin Smith, Terry Dane Smock, Leroy Spiller III, Gerald Wayne Springer, Thomas David Stone, Jesse Allen Taylor, Ed David Taylor, Robert Edward Thornton, Jeffrey Sanders Tigner, Kenneth Keith Tower Jr., James Edward Wells, Roy Rogers West, Joseph Leon Whitaker Jr., John Dennis Horff, Oscar Burnett Williams, Gary Wayne Withers, Carlos N. Yellow Elk, Jerry Allen Zimmer.